4 franchise bus companies apply for fare hikes. Deputy Financial Secretary Michael Wong tests positive for COVID. And Iran starts producing uranium at 60% purity. Hello and welcome to TVB News. The city's 4 franchised bus companies have applied to raise fares by around 10 to 20%. The Transport and Logistics Bureau said the fare hike applications will be reviewed based on the operating costs and whether the public will be able to afford the increased fares. Jackie Lin reports.
Bus riders might feel the squeeze of inflation soon. Some lament the likely fare hikes as unreasonable, saying the 10 to 20% rise is just too much. Others say they won't switch to using more MTR services because both the bus and train rides are expensive these days. Last year, KMB, City Bus, New World First Bus, and New Lantau Bus raised their fares by 8.5% to 12%. The Executive Council refused to greenlight a proposed fare hike by Longwind Bus. KMB and Longwind Bus sought to raise fares again around the middle and early parts of this year, respectively. The operators said Longwind Bus, with airport routes as the mainstay of its services, recorded very salient revenue drops under the ongoing pandemic. Coupled with unrelenting high fuel prices and surges in manpower costs, the companies are facing difficult operating environments. Meanwhile, City Bus and New World First Bus cited rising operating costs due to inflation and high diesel prices. They said they also offered a 4.5% wage increase to their workers this year. New Lantau Bus said it will apply to raise its fares in the latter part of this year, but the extent will be less than 10%. The Transport and Logistics Bureau says it will review the fare hike applications in accordance with existing mechanisms. Factors to be considered include changes in operating costs and revenue, and whether the public will be able to afford the increased fares. To ease the burden on passengers, the Bureau added it will offset the extent of fare hikes by factoring in the amount of tolls exempted for buses. The Bureau will consult relevant transport panels at the Legislative Council over the proposals in due course before submitting them to the Executive Council for a final decision. Inflation woes too might soon be felt in other daily expenses. Star Ferries operator has applied to double the fares. 2 power companies, Hong Kong Electric and CLP Power, also proposed a year-on-year net rate increase of 45% and 20% respectively for their tariffs starting in January next year. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
A report by the Director of Audit urged the Transport Department to shorten the waiting time of driving tests and update the question banks for driving written tests regularly. Christy Kahn with details.
The Audit Commission reviewed and examined the Transport Department's licensing services for drivers, saying that improvements have to be made. A report published by Audit said that the waiting time for people applying for road tests for non-commercial vehicles saw a significant increase starting in 2016. This happened after the Transport Department removed its pledge to conduct 95% of road tests within 82 days of receiving applications for vehicle driving licenses. Since then, the average waiting time for a motorcycle road test was 257 days in 2021, up from 67 days in 2015. The average wait time for the private car road test even took longer. Applicants had to wait for 294 days in 2021 if they opted to take their test at test centers in the Hong Kong region. Back in 2015, the waiting time was just about 111 days. The waiting time for a light goods vehicle road test, however, was up to 410 days in 2021, according to the audit report. Audit also said 7 of the 13 driving test centers, which offer road tests for non-commercial vehicles, didn't reach an 80% utilization rate in 2019. In light of the situation, the auditor suggested the Transport Department streamline the duty reporting arrangement for driving examiners, as well as increase the manpower. Separately, audit called on the department to update its question banks for driving written tests regularly, noting that the previous update was made in 2000, over 20 years ago. So far, the government agreed with the audit recommendations. Christy Khan, TVB News.
Hong Kong reported 7,985 new COVID infections today, 611 of which were imported. 11 more patients succumbed to the virus. Deputy Financial Secretary Michael Wong is among those who tested positive. He is now undergoing quarantine. A government spokesperson said Wong had worn masks and complied with anti-COVID measures at work, including taking rapid antigen tests regularly. His wife, Commissioner for Labor Mei Chan, is also undergoing home isolation. Her rapid antigen test results have been so far negative. The mainland reported over 28,000 locally acquired new COVID cases today, thousands more than yesterday. Meanwhile, according to foreign media outlets, large-scale protests related to coronavirus restrictions broke out at a Foxconn factory in Hainan. Timothy Lee tells us more.
Employees from a Foxconn factory in Zhengzhou City in Henan Province were reported to have marched on the streets and clashed with the police and people in hazmat suits. According to foreign media reports, the employees are not satisfied with the so-called closed-loop infection control measures, including the food they have been supplied with and their salaries. One person threw an object at the police, and the people in hazmat suits could be seen using steel sticks to beat the workers. Another piece of footage showed some workers tearing down the metal barricades surrounding the factory and leaving the premises. Meanwhile, Guangdong Province logged 8,811 new infections, with 95% reported in the provincial capital, Guangzhou. Guangzhou's virus-hit Haizhu district extended its infection control measures for the 6th time to midnight on Sunday. Residents in the infection control areas of Haizhu are not able to order takeaway food. This as the government said such services could contribute to further transmission of the virus and demanded all food delivery providers to stop taking orders from the infection control areas. Beijing logged 1,486 new infection cases. Residents were asked to work from home and hold online or telephone meetings instead of working at the office. Chongqing, southwest China's megacity, logged 6,934 new infections. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Dr. Anthony Fauci, the U.S. health official lauded by some and vilified by others, has used his last White House briefing to promote vaccines and denounce division. Fauci is retiring soon, but has headed the U.S. National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases since 1984. Matthew Bray reports.
Fauci's handling of the COVID pandemic and his blunt assessments from the White House podium during its darkest days made him a hero to some public health advocates, but a villain to some on the right. America lost over 1 million people to the coronavirus. Fauci believes in vaccinations. Once again began with this mantra.
Are the vaccines safe? That keeps coming up. The answer is now, overwhelmingly, it should be off the table. There have been 13 billion doses of a COVID-19 vaccine that have been distributed worldwide, hundreds of millions in the United States, and there's robust safety monitoring systems that are in place. And clearly, an extensive body of information clearly indicates that they're safe.
Fauci encouraged Americans to get boosters and touted the effectiveness of masks, both issues partisan and divisive in the U.S.
I don't want to see anybody hospitalized, and I don't want to see anybody die from COVID. Whether you're a far-right Republican or a far-left Democrat, it doesn't make any difference to me. I look upon it the same way as I did in the emergency room in the middle of New York City when I was taking care of everybody that was coming in off the street.
Fauci drew the ire of former President Donald Trump and Republicans generally for cautioning against the reopening of the American economy too quickly. Another fierce critic is Republican Senator Rand Paul, who Fauci tangled with in Senate hearings. If congressional oversight hearings are launched by Republicans, the health official said he would comply.
So I absolutely will cooperate fully and testify before the Congress if asked. You may not know, but I've testified before the Congress a few hundred times, okay, over the last 40 years or so. So I have no trouble testifying. We can defend and explain and stand by everything that we've said.
And on Tuesday, the White House pushed for Americans to get updated bivalent boosters that target Omicron and the original coronavirus. So far, the take-up is just 13%. Matthew Bray, TVB News.
Iran has begun producing enriched uranium at 60% purity at its underground Fordo nuclear plant, according to the country's official news agency, IRNA. The agency described the move as a response to a resolution by the United Nations nuclear watchdog calling for Iran's cooperation with a probe into man-made uranium particles. Daniel Rao tells us more.
The UN nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, said the 60% enrichment at Fordo, which is around 100 kilometers south of the Iranian capital, Tehran, coincides with similar production at the centrally located Natanz plant. Enrichment to 60% purity is one short technical step away from weapons-grade levels of 90%. Experts have recently warned that Iran now has enough 60% enriched uranium to reprocess into fuel for at least one nuclear bomb. Iran's foreign ministry said the country was taking the steps in reaction to a resolution adopted last week by the IAEA. The resolution called for Iran's cooperation with an investigation by the agency into man-made uranium particles found at 3 undeclared sites in the country. A separate report said IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi was seriously concerned that Iran has still not engaged on the agency's probe, which is one of the key sticking points in ongoing talks for a renewed nuclear deal. It has been nearly 2 years since IAEA officials have had full access to monitor Iran's nuclear sites. Efforts to revive Iran's 2015 nuclear deal with world powers, which saw sanctions on Tehran cut in return for a de-escalation of its nuclear program, have repeatedly stalled. The US unilaterally pulled out of the deal, formerly known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, in 2018 under then-President Donald Trump. It reimposed sanctions on Iran, prompting Tehran to ramp up its nuclear program. A joint statement from Germany, France and Britain, the 3 Western nations that remain in the Iran nuclear deal, condemned Iran's latest decision to begin producing uranium at 60% enrichment. An analyst believes Iran's move may be an attempt to extract nuclear deal concessions from the West.
It seems that for Iran there is no diplomatic channel now, so all the more reason why Iran should speed it up in order to either put some pressure on the West or the free world, or to become sort of a nuclear state, because this has remained the main means by which to secure its or the regime's stability and politics of survival.
Daniel Rell, TVB News.
More rescuers and volunteers have been deployed in parts of Indonesia's main island of Java to search for the dead and missing from Monday's earthquake. The 5.6 magnitude tremor has killed at least 268 people and injured 1,000 more. Officials said the death toll is likely to rise as some remote areas remain unreachable. More than 12,000 Army personnel have been deployed to help in rescue efforts being carried out by the police, government search and rescue teams, and volunteers. They're also distributing water, food, and medical supplies, as well as erecting temporary shelters for those left homeless by the quake. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said he had never been briefed by security officials that any candidates in the 2019 federal election might have been influenced by financing from China. He made the remark after a news report claimed Trudeau was informed that Beijing was trying to interfere in Canadian politics, including by funding at least 11 candidates in the election. Trudeau said his government has not identified the candidates publicly because he does not know who they are. He said he only learned of that specific allegation from the media. Diplomatic strain between Canada and Beijing came under a fresh spotlight. That was when President Xi Jinping candidly called out the leaking of a conversation he had with Trudeau at the G20 summit in Bali last week. And still ahead, Ukrainian law enforcement officers search Orthodox Christian sites after a priest spoke favorably about Russia. Russia launches new nuclear-powered icebreakers to ensure year-round navigation in the Western Arctic region. And the Hong Kong Golf Club to conduct ecological tours on its Fanling site. welcome back. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Russia of turning the cold of winter into a weapon of mass destruction. He said Russian missile strikes have destroyed almost half of the country's energy facilities as Ukrainians brace for what is traditionally harsh winter conditions. Authorities are already evacuating people from some southern areas where they say the lack of power supplies threatens winter survival. Nazvi Karim has more.
Snow and winter has arrived in Kherson and many other areas of Ukraine. At night, paramedics in the area are mostly working in the dark. After recapturing parts of Kherson from retreating Russian forces, they found that the fleeing army plundered a significant amount of hardware, including ambulances. These Kherson residents are being piled into trains, taking them to warmer parts of the country, with the government unable to assure adequate power and water supplies in areas where key infrastructure has been devastated by Russian missiles. Moscow has conducted 6 massive aerial attacks on Ukrainian cities over the past few weeks, targeting mainly power stations. The last one on November 15th involved around 100 rockets. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the government has set up around 4,000 invincibility centers around the country, providing Ukrainians with sanctuary and warmth from brutal winter conditions, should Russian strikes again knock out essential services. He said the center would offer electricity, telephone services, internet, heating, water, first aid, and other services during blackouts. Ukraine's energy officials expect rolling blackouts to last until at least the end of March. On the battlefields, Russian Defense Ministry again accused Kiev of shelling the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and risking a nuclear incident. Ukraine denies those charges and says Russia is responsible for a weekend attack that damaged a reactor. Kiev said Russian artillery hit a maternity hospital in Zaporizhzhia, killing a baby. Ukrainian law enforcement officers, meanwhile, searched Orthodox Christian sites in the capital, Kiev, after a priest reportedly spoke favorably about Russia during a service. The buildings at the Perchersk-Lavra monastic complex are among UNESCO-listed World Heritage Sites. Hundreds of Ukrainian Orthodox communities have cut their ties with the Moscow-governed branch of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which was long a key source of Russian influence and power in Ukraine. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
Russia has launched 2 nuclear-powered ice-breaking ships that will ensure year-round navigation in the western Arctic region. President Vladimir Putin, overseeing the ceremony from Moscow, said the re-equipping of the Russian fleet was needed to cement Russia's position as an Arctic power. The Yakutia, which was launched into the water, can smash through ice of up to 3 meters and will enter service in 2024. Another icebreaker, the Rossiya, will be completed by 2027 and can break through ice 4 meters thick. And back here, the Hong Kong Golf Club will begin holding ecological tours on its Fanling premises starting on the 29th of November. Organizers said participants will be able to see a host of rare plant species as well as observe historical architecture housed within the popular golf course. Due to popular demand, the first round of tours has already been fully booked. Timothy Lee reports.
Geoparks often spring to mind when it comes to places home to rich biodiversity, but few would think of finding some of the world's rarest trees inside a golf course. The Hong Kong Golf Club, otherwise known as the Fanling Golf Course, contains some of the world's most endangered tree species, including the Chinese swamp cypress grove. Deemed critically endangered by the International Union for Conservation of Nature, there are fewer than 250 of its kind left on the planet, with the Fanling Golf Course alone housing close to 40 such trees. Besides rare greenery, visitors can also find an assortment of wildlife within the course.
Here at Fanling, over 45% of the land is covered in trees. Behind me here, we have a 120-year-old camphor tree. And these trees and these woodlands really support a lot of different wildlife species that are native to Hong Kong, including many bats, many owls. Fanling, especially the old course, is a really unique landscape in a Hong Kong context. There's nothing like it anywhere in Hong Kong. It's a lowland area of great ecological significance.
Founded in 1889, the Hong Kong Golf Club was built on land where many of the ancestors of the local villagers were entombed. Here, tombs built as far back as during the Ming Dynasty more than 460 years ago can be found around the club's grounds. The club struck a deal with the indigenous inhabitants of the area, allowing the local villagers to play on the course free of charge. The club also permits them to visit their ancestors' tombs and make ritual offerings during the Qingming festival. Among the historical buildings that can be found on the premises, visitors will also be able to see a bright red pavilion standing in the middle of the Fanling Golf Course, commissioned by the former governor Sir Francis Henry May himself.
Behind me is the Old Course Pavilion, a Grade 3 historic building built in 1916 that continues to provide shelter and drinks to golfers. Besides being the venue for the Hong Kong Open, the Fanling Golf Course is also home to a rich variety of heritage sites and biodiversity. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
That's the news. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.